Welcome everybody. I would like to introduce you just a short
Please.
version, which is how I know you, because I know
Please.
you as a leader of a Roma empowerment network that exists in many European countries. I would call it as a European network
Exactly.
of Roma youth, and we have been collaborating on empowering young Roma people to get into politics and decision making, and also to have strong entities,
Exactly.
NGOs. And my introduction is even shorter because I'm the director of United for Intercultural Action. So we are two networks that are collaborating also on many projects. Where have we met? Like I don't remember that. Like when was the first time we actually met? Do you remember?
What I remember is that we have been invited, both of us, to the meeting in Nyíregyháza, and we traveled together. That was the first time when we talked longer. But before...
But what meeting? The meeting for the Janner's meeting? Was it that
The organization, Humanet. I think we met through Humanet.
True. And
What's
we
the
talked about democracy and Nyíregyháza. Yeah, I remember. Now I remember.
Yeah.
Okay, yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
I think
that was the first time.
That was the first, yeah.
And Attila, who was organizing that, worked for me, and now he's also going into politics.
Yeah, I saw.
Yeah.
Because we are friends, so I'm following.
Yeah.
Great to see.
Yeah, it's fine. And we worked for a while, and he was the office manager, but his weak point was English. That was the issue. And as United is very international, and our language in the office is usually also English, so there we had a problem. Yeah, but he also find his own ways, and some we are not with bad intention. And also he does a lot on football, like he's doing this Premier League thing, so he's often in TV actually.
I saw.
So yeah,
that's great.
Nice.
Common friends make strong relations in the end.
Yeah. And my introduction question to you is like, how did you become who you are? What made you choose this path to lead a Roma network? What is this? Because a lot of people ask this question to me as well. Like, what drove you towards this path?
My answer will be very short, but also maybe surprising. It was basically coincidence. Like I didn't participate when I was younger in NGO work, or I was not part of Roma youth groups, as usually when you meet with a Roma activist would tell you, oh yeah, like from my primary school I was volunteering and so on. No, I mean I was growing up in the northern part of Hungary, and where I'm coming from half Roma family, so I got really close to the issues of and problems, but also of the culture of Roma. And during my high school, I was involved more in a mainstream youth organizations or like movements. And it was also not many Roma in my school, for instance. And then I went to study in a university, and again I was not part of Roma Versitas or other colleges as now many young Roma people. So after university I came to study in Budapest it was basically a scholarship for young Roma to study journalism, but also then to practice in a news agency or in different media. And this is where I mostly got engaged, so not with activism, but spending my time with other Roma from different parts of Hungary. And then once I went to Italy to a youth exchange, and there I met with several Roma youth organizations, and this was the catchy moment which kept me in leading now an organization. So step by step, first I became a volunteer, besides my work, and then coordinating some educational parts. And time to time, it was basically the people around me and the organization who basically elected me. So this was not chosen by me. Since 10 years, I'm part of Phiren Amenca with an amazing team, mostly with Roma women. So yeah, that's my short story basically.
Truly amazing team that I can add. And my question, what does your organization do? Like what is Phiren Amenca? How would you explain it to people who never heard of you?
It's again very complex, but as you told in the beginning, in the introduction, actually we do everything which empower young Roma and bringing alliances with other minorities and with young people from mainstream communities. So we're using tools such as volunteering, European mobility programs, education, activism, learning about Roma Holocaust, Roma history, decision making and policy making, because we believe these all aspects are very important for Roma youth participation. So this is the basic aim, that we capacitate young Roma to participate in any parts of their life.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. It's very interesting. And how many people are working with you? How many people do you reach per year?
I mean, we are a quite small team. We are 3 people working in Budapest, and we have a colleague in Brussels. But we are a network, as you mentioned. So we have like among like full members, if I've used these boring terms, like we have 12 organizations, but it's such a broad network of organizations, not just in Europe, but also outside of Europe. So we have partners in even, in India, in Nicaragua, and now we are trying to even broaden it. So we have, let's say, 20-30 strong partners. Mm-hmm. And it depends. I mean, I think we are quite good reaching out young people. Now with the online sphere, I would not say it's easier, because to reaching out young people it's quite difficult, but we have large scale events. So we also have this so-called Socceres Europa, Roma Youth Social Forum, what we organize. So we always trying to bring together 100-200 people physically. Then we are also so many events. So I would say thousands of people in person in a year, and many more through online events. So we really try to catch young people, and then they are also involving their community. So that's this multiplying effect is the way how we are working.
Thank you. I saw a lot of young, bright, full-eyed Roma youth in your events that have like the energy, the capacity to be active citizens, representatives of the municipality they live. Where do they disappear? Why I don't see them when they are over 30? Why I only see them between 20 and 30? What happens?
This is, I think that it's very complex. There are many reasons. Of course, on the one hand, because we are also depending on donors. So our events reaching age between 18 and 30. So this is the young people you can reach, or even 35 a bit. So we have this focus. I mean, it's also because if you look into strategies like Roma strategies, that none of them targeting this age group. So for us, this is very, very important that we really involve young people, specifically age between, let's say, 16 35, because there are no specific programs for them. They are also not belonging to mainstream youth events, and not because we should say that all mainstream events are excluding them. It's also they don't have the access, they don't have the knowledge, so we are also trying to bring them there. So one reason is this, and the second is because we hope that they become the new leaders and they are coordinating their own youth groups. This is many cases, like for instance, we had so many volunteers who now form their own NGOs, and 3 weeks ago they just organized the first Pride in Page. Mm-hmm. So we are trying to make them the new leaders of our generations, and really to give them the space to. So
your youth not disappears but turns into heads of other organizations. But why I don't see older generation Roma who are working in this field, who have the same motivation, who have the same spark in their eyes, like this youth? Where this spark goes? That's the question.
That's the question. I think this is again a big debate you are touching, this generation.
I will do this. I honestly prepared for questions that are debatable, that's for sure.
I mean, we have always, these arguments of the the generational transition. So of course, we are also not doing always the best, because in the present you have to focus on the present and and then it's very difficult to have the future generation and really to give your roles to them. So it's one big challenge. On the other hand, we had many meetings with the older generation of Roma activists and leaders, and it was always expressed by the younger generations that there is no transition. So they have never felt that, okay, the old leaders are giving them the space, the knowledge, the tools, and we are also arguing for this. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, these are conflicts. I think it's many times we are competing. Just imagine that there is a strong new movement, young people with totally new ideas. So then, of course, you are risking your space and your situation. And then, of course, if you look, for instance, specifically in Hungary, and if you look into these so-called Roma leaders, for instance, in this Roma self-governments, then they are just they really keeping their space and spots since mm-hmm. decades, and that's I think the main reason.
So there is a glass ceiling of age over this, that there is an age group that is now in power, and the one that is under cannot get into because of this kind of age gap and structures.
Yes, and because also, if you don't get appreciation from the older generation, then you are not really getting motivated. So we mm-hmm. see this with many young people, that they would go into positions, or they would, have the motivation, the self-esteem, but older generations are really destroying it very easily, and
mm-hmm.
that's very dangerous.
That's something we have to work on together.
Of course.
Yes. Now, today, that the reason why we called you in is, of course, a little bit connected to what United does, which is also connected mm-hmm. to the 9th of November, which is a commemorative day of one of the beginning phases of the Holocaust. The Kristallnacht, when German citizens, ordinary citizens, were allowed to rage on the fellow Jewish citizens in Germany and trashing their windows, and that's how the name is coming, the mm-hmm. Kristallnacht, so the glass that is shattered. So my question is, it is not your personal feeling, but also the European feeling of Roma. How is it to be Roma, or even as often called Gypsy in Europe? How is the feeling today?
I think it's a super mixed feeling. So on the one hand, of course, this is connected a lot with challenges and oppression, because I'm sure that if those who doesn't know much about the Roma communities and whatever they hear, it's always bad things, coming from the media, coming from the TV and wherever, social media for sure. So if you look around, of course, you feel that there is so much to do and to improve. I mean, we are living in the 21st century, and so many Roma communities living without access of electricity, water, heating, and equal education, or standardization in their life. So it's, if you think about it, it's terrible. So it's so much of a challenge and to-dos and things that you want to change. And on the other hand, I think it's also something which gives you so much personally, so much as a community, so much as a youth group, because we have so much a strong movement in Europe, which I see also young people that when we are coming together, so for instance, there are also big events when there are even thousands of young Roma people, in the same time, and they are really proud of who you are, they are really proud of the roots and all the positive aspects what to belonging to a minority can bring into. Mm-hmm. So it's a very complex and mixed feelings to be Roma in Europe now.
It seems like it's polarized a bit. So there are a lot of negative trends and a lot of positive trends. Some people say that often migration and the Holocaust can be there are some parallelities. This time also Roma Holocaust, Porayamos, is often the topic of your organization. So do you see these parallelities, like the migration, how Europe is treating migrants per se, or even treating Roma per se, with the feeling of the 30s, the educational part of your work? Because it's of course not just going into Auschwitz and see horrible things, but also what led there. So do you see these parallelities in these topics and what happened in the 30s?
Yes. I mean, this is how we organize all our events, to promote, not to promote, but to make visible these parallelities. I mean, this is extremely important. I mean, of course, you cannot say that it's so extreme, but I mean, if you look into like how politics happening, like how everyday life, you know, and how some migrants and not just the migrants, but even LGBT communities are treated, you know, and how all these arguments coming, it's super similar. It's just that in the end of the day, you know, we don't have mass killings, but in the end of the day, we really make the guilties and so yeah, it's so just to understand our activities and educational aspects is basically we are not just talking about the Holocaust. Like for instance, when we are talking about the situation of Roma, we are talking about, so especially in the case of Hungary, of 300 years oppression, which started, you know, so much earlier than the Holocaust. So it's somehow in the timeline of Roma oppression, Holocaust is one moment, a huge, the worst moment, but only one moment. If you think about that, just a few years ago, between 2008 and 2009, we had the series of killings against Roma in Hungary, and people lost their lives because they are Roma. So it's and in many cases we could talk about, you know, other minorities like Jewish communities in all around the world, you know, like or even with migrants and Muslims. So it's we have very similar symptoms, and this is what we have to understand, the structural way of addressing people and oppressing people.
These serial murders in Hungary took place, as you said, in 2008 and 2009, and not many people in Europe are familiar with it. So could you tell me a little bit about this, like just an overview, so the audience also understands?
Not many people know it in Hungary even, you know. So in 2008 and 2009 there were this series attacks Roma in Hungary where 5 people lost their lives, and it was even a 5 years old young Roma boy in Tatárszentgyörgy. The worst thing with this is that basically there were 4 men who basically really think it before and planned this. And they went to the countryside, in many cases in Borsod County in Hungary, where a very big Roma population lives, and they went to the Roma settlements and they shooted randomly, always the last houses. And that time Roma lived really in fear, even years after. So they organized themselves to look around and to save each other. And so this is already a tragedy that these shootings could happen, but also how it was treated. Like police first said it's for sure that this was not, you know, a killings by other people and planned it, but it was like like the house was burned, electric fire, which came.
They threw Molotov cocktail,
exactly.
threw firework and Molotov cocktail on a house. It burned, and then the people who ran out, they were shot at and died. And that's how the police said that it was an electric fire.
Exactly. Yes. So they didn't really follow up, and they didn't really want to, you know, take it as serious as it was. So this is even the worst around this. And yeah, sorry.
No, it's just a recording. So, what do you think the motivation was for these murders? What these people thought? Well, what was their intention with this whole thing? What could it be? I know it's hard to think about their mindset, but what do you think?
You know, it's just who I am to say that they had the same motivation as Nazis had, but it's even told by the court that this was because of racist motivation. So we can say that it's obvious that, you know, they really wanted to. I would not say that they wanted to kill Roma population, because we don't know, but at least I think they wanted to show the example that this could happen with Roma anytime. So, so somehow to show. I'm not sure if they wanted to put Roma in fear, or they wanted to put to those people who are thinking similarly as they are that we can do it. So it's if I'm thinking now, I see these two lines. Of course, is to really to beat Roma up and to show that, you know, they are the guilt of the Hungarian society and in European society, but on the other hand to show to the people with the same ideology that we are strong enough and we can do whatever we want to do.
And what was the reaction of the Hungarian society to these murders? What do you think? Did it raise sympathy? Did it raise some sort of countermeasure?
Not at all. I think it's ignorance on the one hand. Still an ignorance. I think there are, of course, there is always a group of people who is with the community and want, you know, to that the court is doing what the court must do. But on the other hand, it's so much ignorance, also among Roma. So it's not just with the majority society, but in general, I think both Roma and majority are just ignorant. It happened and that's it.
Some say that the reason for this is lack of solidarity. What do you think about this? What is solidarity, and what should be solidarity in this case? What should happen?
I think in this case, solidarity is not enough. Solidarity is important. Solidarity is important when we see how communities are since decades oppressed, or, you know, in some. I mean, of course, you show solidarity when, for instance, someone is beaten up in the street because of any conflict, or which is about on racist motivation or whatever. But when it's a series against people, you know, and a series of killing people, then solidarity is not enough. It's super important, but it's just you have to stand up, and it's not just about Roma. It's about every person who is shooted because of any kind of difference or any kind of belonging, ethnical, sexual, whatever. So I think it's much more of we are not letting people do these things. I don't know how to explain well in English. It would be much easier in Hungarian, but I hope you understand my what I would like to express.
So it's not enough to show solidarity, but you have to come with something direct action.
Actions, exactly.
Yes.
Acting, and of course the court decision is very important.
Like the trial, and the movie about the trial they made.
So
it is important.
3 of them are forever in the prison. One of them, I think, going to be free in a year or something, which is, again, I mean,
strange.
And also the way the process we ended up in the trial, it shows that how the things are not functioning well in our society, you know.
Yeah, in the case of United, we had a fellow activist that was murdered because of his Jewish origin, just recent years, and there also the court did not investigate so much the racist motivation, but the crime itself. And then it is a crime of murder, of course, but it's just an attempted murder because they didn't want to do it. It was like a fight in a bar, and the person who started the fight started with his Jewish origin, so he called out on his Jewish origin. But the court didn't take this seriously unless NGOs intervened, so like members of United and of course the fellow organizations. They went to court, monitored the trial, and every time they pushed for this racist motivation, and then finally the public view turned, and then the charges were upgraded with the bias
Very
motivation,
good.
and then it became a hate crime. So it is very important.
It is.
What do we do? And that's why I'm asking you one of the most complicated questions of today. What would you have done? So if it would be now 1938, what would Marietta do to block the Holocaust happening? Because we are now living in this time, and you are active in the things that you mentioned, and they are brilliant. But if you would have the knowledge of history, and if you could go back to the time of Holocaust, and you would have, of course, the knowledge that we do now, what could you have, like, can you imagine what would be the best thing to do in the 30s in Hungary or in Germany or wherever in Europe? What could we do to avoid what happened after?
I'm thinking about this often, you know. So it's when we are trying to learn about history, you try to think about what happened and why could it happen and what would I do. And then, of course, in the first moment when you say, oh, this could never happen and I would do it so much differently. But if you think about, I don't know, what would I have done? If you really think about, because also, you know, I'm when you see what's happening all around the world, you know, like just recently in Afghanistan, or we see on the internet so many, you know, every day, almost every day, that, you know, people were shooted or families are disappearing because of the war, and so many recent cases, and I'm not doing anything. And sometimes I'm feeling frustrated. Why I'm not doing anything, and what can I do? So of course I'm making it public on internet, but that's it, you know. So it's so I don't know what would I have done differently. Of course, there are so many resistance stories which we are always trying to share. So it's first when we tried to understand the Holocaust is of course always you are trying to understand what happened, how many people died. So it's also when we are talking about the Roma victims, we say 500,000. Now we say between 500,000 1.5 million. So if you know, year by year we discover more and more Roma victims, for instance. But besides that, we are always trying to share the resistance stories of any kind of people, Jewish people, of Roma people, and then of course there were also movements, you know, who saving lives or sharing petitions. So there are many cases, you know. They even had groups with guns, you know, to and to save I don't know, or create orphanages in the wood. So for sure I would be belonging to one of them. This is what I say now. I don't know how I would react in such a situation. But that's, I think this is very important to also put this in the narrative. That of course people were, of course many people were victims, and we don't know what they went through mentally and physically. But there was such a big group of people who resisted. And since, I think since 5-6 years, we are also celebrating, sounds very bad, like we are marking May 16, Romani Resistance Day. Because there is this story which I cannot say that it's a real factual historical story, but there is one testimony which we are basing on the story. So it's again, but it's more like a civic narrative that says that on May 16, Roma in the so-called gypsy camp resisted because they have heard that they will be all bringing to the gas chamber, and they would not leave in the next day. So they took I don't know, not knives, but whatever they had, small things, and they saved their lives. And this was the first time when we heard this story, and this empowered and gave us so much hope and motivation. And we use this story throughout the narrative about Roma. And we are sharing it. We are even organizing events and trying to collect more and more small pieces of history, and not just in the Holocaust and during World War II, but before and after, even nowadays. So of course this is extremely important to teach and to learn about the bad and the really, really crazy stories of the Holocaust, but also to see all these small personal victories of people who saved others' lives. And so yeah, to answer your question, I don't know what would I have done. I don't know how to react now when I see very, very, very bad and similar cases, when it's about, you know, war or even attacks, mass attacks. But these resistance stories are giving hope, and that may be a good example if something.
Thank you very much. We call our campaign actually From Hate to Hope. Mm-hmm. So you are touched very exactly one of the topics of the campaign. Thank you very much. We haven't talked about it before, so it's out of script. But yes, my question is a little bit like, now we were in the past. I understand that it's very difficult to think. Now I ask you a little bit more difficult is about the future. Like, what do you think? How do you see the future of Romani people in Europe and even in the world, I would say? What do you think will happen, and what is your recommendation to happen? Like, what would be the direction to go?
Also, to connect what we just finished as a topic, I think this is very important to face and to understand that people are not aware of the Holocaust. So we 1 second we just finished the topic and we know it, we are talking about it, or we know some parts, so we don't know it, the whole thing. But young people in general in Europe are not aware of what happened throughout the Holocaust. So, or it's just a story, you know, many of them are saying. So this is what we are also trying to do, to educate people. Then of course you are not just sharing the knowledge, but you educate people to stand up, to fight, to resist, to be active. So throughout Roma or Holocaust history and history of any other minority, you can connect to the present and the future, and really, you know, to talk about antigypsyism, antisemitism, and ways and tools to fight against them. So this is what we are trying to do. This is what I'm personally committed to do, and this is what I recommend in institutional level as well. You know, like putting Roma Holocaust and Roma history, for instance, in the school curricula, or even, you know, these resistance stories we mentioned. This is very, very super important element what needs to be done in the future. Besides that, of course, many things, but I think participation of young Roma, if I'm just putting one thing in civic and political life, is also very important, because then you can change so many legislations, narratives. So, and there are so many different aspects from education, employment, but for this I let for maybe for another discussion because it's extremely huge topic again. But I think if we have well-established Roma and youth, especially, because I believe youth is the future. So not just because I'm saying, but naturally. So investing in young people is always the best way to secure, you know, a healthy and positive society, let's say.
Yeah, so we often said, or that was one of the campaign slogans of anti-Semitism, is never again. And of course, what we see is that some people want it to happen again, or is it somehow seems like that it can happen again, but your movement and the people like you are turning it into really never again, because the awareness that you put out is making people afraid that it will happen again, so they will be ready to stop it when it must be stopped. That's how we say from hate to hope in the future.
Definitely, as you said.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the conversation.
Thank you, Balint.